Welcome to the UK Data Service Data Impact event, Poverty in Data. This event is produced by the UK Data Service, which brings together some of the most robust and complex quantitative and qualitative data produced by research associations, governments and non-governmental organisations in the UK and internationally. My name is Findan McGreen. I'm the UK Data Service Director of Impact, and I'm delighted to be hosting this pre-recorded webinar session. This is the second of our Poverty in Data event, Perspectives on Poverty. We had a great early careers researcher workshop yesterday in Manchester, and tomorrow we have a panel of experts presenting and asking questions in our final session, Research, Policy and Next Steps. It's not too late to register for that session. You can do so on the UK Data Service website, or keep an eye out on our social media channels for the link to the Zoom webinar tomorrow morning. That session starts at 11 AM. The focus of today's session is Poverty in Data, Perspectives of Poverty. It's been a turbulent few years for all of us, but the dramatic rise in the cost of living has impacted those who are already struggling most. It's vital that high quality data enhanced research is made available to help with interventions, help understand people's situation and to enable policy to support those who need it most. We're delighted to have a variety of contributors to today's session. We want to be able to highlight not just the data and research that uses it, but to show several different perspectives on the issue of poverty across this session. As I mentioned, today's content is all pre-recorded. This has enabled several different voices to be heard, and in a way that a live session wouldn't have allowed. We hope that this will be a resource both now and into the future. Shortly, we'll be hearing from Christina Adane, an activist working in the intersection of social justice and youth culture. We will then hear from Professor Nissa Finney, who will be introducing the Evidence for Equality National Survey, which provides data on experience and inequalities for ethnic and religious minorities in Britain. Finally, we'll hear several contributions from a collaboration project between Cheshire West Poverty Truth Team, their Community Inspirers and Social Justice Chester, a research group based in the University of Chester. They've been working on a project over the last couple of years using a co-production methodology. They'll explain how this worked in practice and the benefits it brought to the work. Their contributions will highlight the voices of those with lived experience of poverty, the Community Inspirers. But first up, Christina Adane. Christina was co-founding co-chair of Bite Back 2030's Youth Board, a youth-led movement fighting the injustices of the food industry. She has fronted national campaigns over the years, such as extending free school meal provision over lockdown. This garnered 450,000 signatures on her position, which led to a government U-turn in the May half-term. Marcus Rashford then spearheaded this campaign during the summer holidays. Christina has worked intensively during and after college at Bite Back, focusing on their external relations with government and corporations. She travelled Europe speaking at conferences, working with the senior executives of multinational companies to improve their child health strategy, alongside lobbying government to implement health policies. Christina received her first accolade at 16 when she was named one of the BBC's 100 most influential women in the world. We're delighted to have Christina share her passion and insight as part of this event.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm a food equity campaigner and I'm here to talk about my journey and why data and research is so important to what I do as a campaigner. So I was first exposed to the cruelties of the outside world when I was like 11, 12, because I grew up in the digital age. I'm Gen Z. So I guess a pro and a con about growing up like that is that you see the world much quicker for what it is. You don't have that same, you don't get to keep that same childish innocence, I guess. You have to grow up much faster. But anyway, the Ebola crisis in West Africa happened at that time. It just started, and it was the first time I saw kids that looked like mine, parents that looked like mine, suffering so much for what is obviously human injustice, and it really made me question why the world is the way it is, why people like them don't have access to resources like that people like me living where I do have. And so that was the first wake-up call, I guess, and since then I questioned my own positionality and my family's positionality in society, realizing that I live in a council estate. That means I don't have access to certain spaces and certain things that my peers would at school, or the fact that I was on free school meals, which I realized at 15 years old when I joined Bite Back 2030, a youth-led movement set up by Jamie Oliver. I realized then, wow, like me being on free school meals, me growing up in a council estate, living in a food desert means so much for the life I am statistically going to live, the health I am going to have. And I guess this is the first point in the story where data was so pivotal in my life, because obviously I have my lived experience, but to see what my health is in numbers was crazy. So when I was 15 and I just joined Bite Back 2030, in one of the training sessions I was told that I was twice as likely to develop obesity than my wealthier peers, and likely to die around 10 years earlier because of where I lived. That completely changed my perspective on food, because food is a silent indicator of poverty. It's not as loud as housing. It's not as loud as, not being able to get the same books or the same clothes or the same car that your peers would have in school, their families. It's very silent. It's things like maybe being put in a separate lunch queue, or being given a brown paper bag on school trips because you were the special kids on free school meals. And so that realization was what really empowered me to be a campaigner, realizing that it's not just an individual thing, it's a systemic issue, and there are loads of people like me that deal with this and deal with the stigma of being on free school meals. And that was what led me in lockdown to start the petition to extend free school meals over the May half term. It was the 8th week of lockdown, and the government had just announced that they wouldn't do so. So I called for a U-turn, and that petition got over almost 500,000 signatures. Basically instantly, it became a national news story, and again, with campaigning, data is so important. Without really understanding the depth of the issue, I wouldn't be empowered, despite my lived experience, to talk so eloquently about the topic, because I didn't even have the power to articulate my story without data, because I didn't know it was a systems thing. I didn't know that food was an oppressor in my life without looking at the data. And it's not just free school meals, it's junk food marketing as well. When I was with Bite Back 2030, they released a report highlighting that in the past 4 years, from 2022, young people in the UK were exposed to over 15 billion ads online, which equates to 500 ads per second through social media, through their text, through their emails. So data does a really, really good job at articulating the system's issues that individual stories can't do. Because if I tell you a story about myself and my experience, it's really easy to fall into language frameworks that focus it on me, focus it on my choices, my lifestyle, which isn't the problem, right? It's not about lack of choice, it's a lack of option. Data displays the lack of option that's on my high street, right? Data displays the food deserts. It points towards how 90% of what I eat is controlled by the same big 10 food companies. It talks about how 70% of our diets as young people in the UK are ultra-processed foods. That is what's important. And I think when you pair that with lived experience, it's really, really powerful. And that's how I've been able to make the policy changes that I have with Bite Back. because we pair data with lived experience to make really powerful arguments. And that also comes through in the people that I work with. So I do a lot of work with think tanks, as well as NGOs, even the work I do internationally. I'm always keeping an eye on sort of reports coming out in my areas of interest in food. And again, that really empowers my story, but also makes me understand, informs the narrative I'm using. There's a really amazing group called Frameworks Institute, which have done incredible work in changing the narrative in food systems. And the way that they do that is anthropological data that they collect over 2 years. And it essentially shows us how we should talk to people about a systemic issue that otherwise could very much be blamed on the individual. So in food, that was really pivotal, because under Boris Johnson, no matter what your opinions of him, he, and this is why lived experience and data are so important, he realized through his own lived experience of getting obesity that it is really bad, and it opened his ears to the data and to the systems information that was saying, actually, this is a really bad problem. It's a really bad epidemic happening in the UK that is because, not because people are, fat and just want to be that, or because it's their fault, it's their lifestyle choices. Actually, no, there's huge ramifications because of our environments, both online and offline, that force us almost to just eat crap food. And yes, it's worse when you're poor, but we're all affected by it. Because if Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, who is very wealthy, very educated, still struggles with his health and still struggles with eating well, that shows that we are all victims of this food environment. And it was the campaigning built on lived experience in collaboration with data that was able to get us to a junk food marketing policy ban in 2021. So the next point I'm going to talk about is the role of young people and individuals, and how we can play a role in highlighting this issue and advocating for it. So obviously, I'm an example of a young person that is in this space. Bite Back 2030 is an amazing example of young people campaigning for food equity. But a lot of the work that I'm doing now is around culture and how you can utilize youth culture and meet young people where they are at to create change. Because as a campaigner that started very young at 15, it was really difficult for me to balance everything else going on in my life with campaigning. It took a toll on my grades, on my social life, and I wouldn't have it any other way because I love what I do, but that's not affordable for so many young people, especially like working class young kids. And that's represented in like a lot of the social movements in the UK. They do tend to be middle class white kids pushing like the way forward, and that translates to every generation. Actually, even a lot of the parents I engage with on the topic of food aren't working class families, because they don't have the time nor capacity to do something about this issue. They're too busy living it. So I guess the first thing I'd say is be conscious that the people you engage with probably have enough privilege to not deal with the problem. And that's a really big thing that like I push for. And it's not that you need to get them in the room necessarily, it's that you need to meet them where they're at. But anyway, I digress. So I'm working a lot in youth culture at the moment to understand how we can use vessels of youth culture like music, fashion, and art to get to where young people are at. Because that's what the junk food marketing industry does, right? And that's what every other like bad like industry does. It's they meet young people where they're at. Yet in the NGO sector, weirdly enough, people expect young people to come to them. We should be using the same tactics as the junk food marketing industry, the tobacco industry. We should use and infiltrate mediums of culture to make it sexy to be a campaigner, make it sexy to stand against these issues. I think that's what I'm really learning to do. So I'm editor-in-chief of a magazine at the moment for a streetwear brand, just trying to tamper with and play with language frameworks and visual frameworks to see what young people react to. So what I mean by that is I had a magazine myself last year in music and other things that I cared about. And one really simple switch that I made is just not take advertising from junk food brands or energy drinks. And they were the first ones to come running to like ask for paid promotions. But I just said no. Show young people, and young people are realizing this with the issues of the Israel-Gaza conflict. So many people just stopped eating McDonald's and Starbucks, and so many people stopped vaping because they realized lithium batteries were from the exploitation going on in the Congo mines. So there is an appetite there. You just have to show people that making systemic changes aren't as hard as we think, and there are things that you can do on an individual level to do so. So for me, it was not taking junk food sponsorship from brands on my media platform, and that's something the majority of people won't even notice, right? But it's about finding what that trick is. What's the sweet spot between systems thinking and like the social justice space and culture, and really unlocking that, because like just one thing can be enough to start a whole conversation. A point that I really remember was pivotal in getting everyday people to talk about food systems was Cristiano Ronaldo moving the Coke bottle out during a conference out of frame and putting water instead, and he just said just water. That started a whole conversation, and Coca-Cola's shares went down by like 4% like the next day. So creating more of these moments, I think, is really interesting, and I'm really deep into working on how we can do that. And the last point, in terms of the challenges we face, I think when talking about young people specifically, we don't know how to talk to people we disagree with, and that is one of the biggest dangers of today. I often am seen as quite controversial because I am non-partisan, so I talk to people on both sides of the political system. I work with anyone that has shared values, essentially, no matter what party you align with, and I think that's really important. Young people don't seem to agree with that. I'm generalizing. A lot of young people don't seem to agree with that. And I'm scared of people just being stuck in their silos and echo chambers. That is really what's preventing, or what's the biggest obstacle at the moment to what I'm doing, is how do you get people to understand that in order to make changes in the long term, you need to talk to whoever's in power, and you need to compromise. So I think that's the biggest challenge at the moment, but there are ways to go around it. I think communications agencies are really important right now, particularly ones that work as social enterprises like DebateMate. They are what got me started in this whole thing, and I really think we should have more of that. We should get young people to debate about these things. We should get young people to understand data and not just throw information at people, but really get them to understand what things mean. And that's a responsibility on academics to use language that's accessible for people like me to understand. But all these challenges we can overcome. So thank you so much to the Data Service for letting me talk. I hope this was useful. And please email me or message me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or want to connect. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Christina for sharing with us. It's great to hear the passion for these causes coming through and for the role she and others are playing in combating issues such as food inequality. Also, for highlighting not only the role data can play in advocacy and campaigning more broadly, but also the impact it can have on individuals. Next up, we have a different perspective. Professor Nissa Finney will be speaking about the recently launched Evidence for Equality National Survey, also known as EVENS. Nissa is Professor of Human Geography at the University of St Andrews. She has researched, taught and published widely on ethnic inequalities, residential mobility, housing, neighbourhood change, segregation and research methods. She's a member of the Centre for Population Change and a founding member of the Centre on the Dynamics of Ethnicity, also known as CODE. Within CODE, Nissa leads the EVENS survey that documents the lives of ethnic and religious minorities, with the aim of providing evidence to address inequalities. The free-to-download EVENS book, Racism and Ethnic Inequality in a Time of Crisis, Policy Press 2023, evidences socioeconomic and other disadvantages of many minoritized ethnic groups in Britain. And Nissa will share about this book during her presentation. Nissa has also undertaken work on poverty and ethnicity with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the Centre for Homelessness Impact.
Hello, I'm Nissa Finney, and I want to talk about the challenges of creating inclusive data using the example of the Evidence for Equality National Survey, which I lead within the Centre on the Dynamics of Ethnicity. So to understand poverty, it can be useful to have large-scale, nationally representative data. And indeed, there are lots of sources that we can access for understanding poverty: the censuses, surveys, administrative data, commercial data. But a big problem with these data is representation. Who is missed, who is included, and how we know about that. And this is particularly relevant for understanding poverty because it's often those most marginalised, disenfranchised groups in society who end up being missed in data collection. And these are exactly the challenges that we wanted to address in the EVENS project. We wanted to ensure that hard-to-reach populations were included, and we wanted to think about how we know whether hard-to-reach populations are adequately included in data. And this focus in EVENS was on the representation of ethnic groups. And this is very relevant for the study of poverty because we know that ethnic minority groups are overrepresented amongst those who are in hardship and poverty. There's a vast amount of evidence about the stark and persistent ethnic inequalities in the UK that show this disadvantage for ethnic minorities, including this work here that we've undertaken within CODE. And many people have documented and argued that these inequalities have been exacerbated during and since the COVID-19 pandemic. So there exists a challenge of data deficiency for understanding the experiences of minoritized ethnic groups. Ethnic groups are not well captured in survey data. We don't have detail, and often there's a geographically clustered approach to the sampling, so places are missed as well. And in those data, such as the census, where we have really good representation, the topics covered are really quite limited. And so that's why we undertook the EVENS survey. EVENS is unique because of a number of things we did that were different from standard survey approaches. And key to that was that we just had an open invitation to anybody who considered themselves to be an ethnic or religious minority to take part in the survey. So there were no restrictions, no waiting for a letter to be invited to take part, no exclusions based on ethnicity or the place where you live, for example. It was an open online survey, also with a telephone option, and we made it available in 14 languages and did that field work through most of 2021. We also applied some quite sophisticated, quite cutting-edge post-survey methodological adjustments, weighting, which is a standard practice in survey, though we use some slightly different innovative approaches to make these data representative of the British population, particularly in terms of ethnicity. And Evens is a really fantastic resource for understanding poverty because it covers a whole range of topics: demographics, ethnicity and identity, socioeconomics, work and employment, physical and mental health, COVID-19 experiences, political trust and experience and affiliations, and a lot of really quite novel data on experiences of racism and discrimination. And there's a lot of detailed information in the survey as well on specific aspects of people's lives relevant to understanding poverty, to do with accommodation and services, the space that people have, internet access, type of work, contract types, job changes, working from home, childcare circumstances, income, and attitudinal information as well about worry about finances and job security, for example, and about experiences of racism and discrimination. So, in sum, Evens is the largest and most comprehensive survey of ethnic and religious minorities in the UK. We have 14,000 participants, 10,000 of whom identify as an ethnic minority. And it's really a novel and robust source of data for understanding the experiences of minoritized ethnic groups, including in terms of poverty and socioeconomic hardship. And you can find out a lot more about the project and results from it in the Evens book, which is available as a free to download ebook. What did we do to get better representation in Evens? We did a number of things, but the most important one that I want to highlight is the partnership working. So we worked with fantastic partners to promote the survey, to build trust in the survey, to engage people with the aims and objectives of the survey, and through that to increase our participation and, crucially, get better representation across and within ethnic groups within the participants in the survey. So we worked with these wonderful partners: Ethnic Minorities and Youth Support in Wales, Friends, Families and Travellers, Stuart Hall Foundation, BMIS in Scotland, Institute for Jewish Policy Research, NHS Race and Health Observatory, Business in the Community, Muslim Council of Britain, the Runnymede Trust, the Hugh Bailey Initiative, the Race Equality Foundation, Operation Black Vote, and Migrants' Rights Network. And that was a really effective way to improve our representation in our survey. We also used a responsive survey design, so every day we were monitoring the profile of our participants and adapting our recruitment accordingly. And we applied, as I've mentioned, some really quite sophisticated adjustments to the survey data after the fieldwork had taken place. Now, I want to present to you some of the findings from Evens to illustrate the kinds of things we can do with these data that aren't possible with other data, and largely because we don't have the representation or the detail of ethnic groups in other data. So I've picked out 3 examples which are all to do with poverty in various ways. And the first one here is about receipt of benefit, the rate of receiving benefit. So there's a row for each ethnic group, and each ethnic group has a dot, green coloured diamond that indicates the rate of benefit receipt for that ethnic group. If that diamond is to the left of the vertical red line, that indicates that that group has a lower rate of benefit receipt than the white British population. If the green diamond is to the right of the red vertical line, then that ethnic group has a higher rate of benefit receipt than the white British population. So first of all, we can see in this chart that there's a real variation across ethnic groups of the rate of benefit receipt, great diversity in that, and particularly that there are considerably higher proportions of some ethnic minority groups compared to white British in need of welfare support. And this is particularly notable for the Gypsy Traveller group towards the top of the chart there, and for the other Black ethnic group lower down in the chart. The next result is about worry about job security. This is the same kind of chart. We read it in the same way. The green diamonds indicate the proportion of that ethnic group who are worried about job security. And here we have it for women and also for men in the 2 charts there. And again, we see higher proportions of some ethnic minority groups compared to the white British who worry about job security. And this is particularly notable for Chinese women and for Arab, other Black, Indian, Pakistani and Bangladeshi men. And this is data that we can't find elsewhere because we don't have this level of ethnic detail together with the kind of detailed questions about people's circumstances in other data sets. And finally, we have results on experiencing financial difficulties. So the proportion of each group, the rate for each group in experiencing financial difficulties compared to the white British group, again indicated by the red vertical line. And once again, we see that many of these green triangles are to the right of that red vertical line, indicating a disadvantage for minoritized ethnic groups. And this is particularly evident in the difference between the other Asian, mixed, other Black and Arab ethnic groups and the white British, those groups being disadvantaged in terms of experiencing financial difficulties. So, some concluding remarks. There certainly do remain many challenges in translating evidence about poverty and inequality into policy, into practice, but nevertheless, producing relevant and high quality data should remain a priority, I argue. And particularly in this era of big data, when we are awash with data, I think we should be really attentive to this question of who is included and who is missing, because it's often the most disenfranchised who are missing from the data that we present as evidence and that is used in policy and practice. So innovative survey methods such as those used in EVENS offer the possibility for more inclusive data that represents often hidden groups and provides information on their circumstances, experiences and perceptions that are not available elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nissa, for sharing about this really significant and important data set and for discussing the insights it can bring on the area of poverty and inequality. We look forward to seeing how the data is used over the coming years in research and policy development. One of the major considerations we wanted with this event, hosted by the UK Data Service and focusing on poverty and data, was to not focus solely on quantitative data. For every entry, row or spreadsheet, we see there are real people behind those numbers. We're delighted to be able to showcase some powerful and eye-opening contributions from Social Justice Chester and the West Cheshire Community Inspirers. They have been working together on a co-production project with those who have lived experience of poverty, the Community Inspirers. This section will be introduced by Dr. Nancy Evans from Social Justice Chester and will include several videos describing their project, how they went about co-production, and will get the perspectives of those dealing with the outcomes of poverty in their daily lives from the Inspirers.
I'm Dr. Nancy Evans. I'm a sociology lecturer and researcher at the University of Chester, and I'm a member of the Social Justice Chester research team, which was formed in 2022 together with my colleagues Dr. Kim Ross, Dr. Holly White and Jen Robinson. The focus of our research is on highlighting and challenging social harms and injustices using a participatory approach. This is about actively involving, collaborating with and creating authentic and meaningful connections with the groups directly affected by the issues being researched. In order to research the issue of enduring poverty in the context of a cost of living crisis, we built on existing partnerships with the local West Cheshire Poverty Truth Team and the West Cheshire Community Inspirers. Community Inspirers are individuals with lived or living experience of poverty or hardship, which may also include things such as the experience of using a food bank, homelessness or housing insecurity, mental health challenges and financial hardship. Inspirers share their expertise, which is born from these direct experiences, and use their voice to bring about positive changes in regard to how people experiencing hardship are viewed and treated. This might include in terms of the sorts of services that they have access to and the experiences that they have with them. Community Inspirers work with the Cheshire West Poverty Truth team, local civic bodies, businesses and the University of Chester to help address poverty and identify and tackle its root causes. Together we've been conducting ongoing collaborative research about the dominant public narratives around the cost of living crisis and the lived realities of long-standing poverty. This has included workshops, interview discussions and photo elicitation. To disseminate our findings in an accessible, impactful way, we co-produced a public exhibition in Chester called Walking Further Together, which took place in November. Over 100 people, including key local stakeholders from fields related to poverty, academics and students from the university, as well as members of the public, came along. The exhibits were interactive and visitors could listen, watch and add their own ideas and get involved in discussions. The following clip was produced at the exhibition and gives an insight into the event, including inputs from community inspirers and members of the Social Justice Chester research team.
We're here today because we're at an exhibition with the University of Chester, who are doing an exhibition about poverty and also about working collaboratively with co-production and how it works.
The exhibition today is all about the lived experience of poverty. Everything that we have on display comes from research, it comes from evidence, it comes from people's lived experiences and living experiences.
It's basically to highlight and showcase what the reality of what living in poverty is and to try and tackle some of them stigmas and prejudices really, and kind of look at how we and the public and other organisations can work together to help alleviate that.
I've come here today just to find out a little bit more around the great work that's going on in terms of the Poverty Truth. Great to meet with the inspirers and that lived experience, that living experience. I guess really to catch up on a lot of the initiatives that the group are working on at the moment and the real difference that they're making to people's lives and out in the community.
I'm here today to support the community inspirers, whether it's about period poverty, whether it's about food poverty. These are all really, really important issues and the inspirers are doing an absolutely fantastic job to highlight these issues in our borough. Lived experience is crucial to everything that the council does. We really, really need lived experience to enable us to know how best to support the people in our borough.
You have to work with the people who are most affected by the subject that you're talking about, because you get that lived experience and you can't replicate that.
Artwork that's been put together by the inspirers to showcase what poverty truly is and the impact that it has on the people that have gone through poverty. And obviously some of the stands contain information that have been put together by people that have gone through poverty and the impact that it has. It's important that people hear the real life stories of poverty because it shows the real impact.
That living experience can actually make you stop, make you think about what you're doing, and there's nothing like talking to people with that living experience in order to bring about real meaningful change that does make a difference on the ground.
Co-production has been a really key underlying element of everything that we've done here today, so we really wanted to build that in to the discussion element and allow members of the audience to ask questions and to allow both the inspirers and the researchers the opportunity to respond.
I think thinking about how we can move forwards with this, how we can make sure that this continues to grow and get bigger, because these are themes that are relevant nationally, not just locally. So I think going forwards, hopefully what we can do next will be at the sort of forefront of our discussions.
The research conducted by Social Justice Chester and the West Cheshire Inspirers is underpinned by a participatory approach. The following clip explains the importance of this and the closely related concept of co-production. It hopefully provides inspiration for how co-production can be utilised in research and the value of this approach.
Building on partnerships with Cheshire West, Chester Council and Community Inspirers, social justice researchers from the University of Chester have worked together on a project to explore and communicate lived experiences of poverty in their communities. Joint workshops, meetings, and an exhibition aim to challenge stigmatising representations, influence policy and processes, and reinforce the message that nothing about us, without us, is for us.
So when you're working on a project that has co-production at its core, you feel like you can make a difference and build a legacy, and that's empowering.
Yeah, it's about being heard and actively being part of processes that have an impact on the way you get to live and experience social life.
I remember the exhibition title, Walking Further Together, came from discussions during a workshop. We wanted to show that co-production in social research projects is the logical way to achieve more. The idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, that expression of empathy, really influenced our exhibition.
Yeah, this is our story, but we want people to hear the reality of it. It's important to hold people to account so that they can learn from it.
I think working in this way means that you can highlight voices that might otherwise go unheard, and therefore you can challenge problematic narratives and bring about change. It's been about building trusted relationships. That's what co-production should achieve.
You want to show people how simple it is to make changes. It just starts with a conversation.
For me, working in this way has been about showing the raw impact of poverty, to show its isolating effects as a way of saying it's not acceptable, and it's everyone's responsibility to bring about change.
It's the feeling of working co-productively that keeps me coming back, of feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling inspired, feeling like what you do has a positive impact.
What keeps us focused is that we want better, more equal experiences and opportunities, to be involved in projects from when the first pen hits the first piece of paper to delivering its conclusions.
Working in this way and sharing skills and knowledge isn't always the quickest, easiest or cheapest way of working. It demands resilience and not giving up when faced with obstacles. You have to be flexible and open-minded and keep challenging power inequalities.
One thing that is important to me is to feel listened to over time, to be involved and to have trust in relationships you make when working together for change.
Working together means we are more likely to achieve the ambition of better lives for all, not just the few.
When we reflected on the project and how we have worked together, the benefits and learning hasn't been in the final outcome, it's been in the process.
One particularly powerful piece displayed at the exhibition, which was co-produced by the Community Inspirers and Social Justice Chester, was based on a photo elicitation method, whereby the Community Inspirers took their own photos or created artwork that they felt represented the reality of living in poverty for them, and described what the picture meant to them. These images were displayed visually at the exhibition, and they were also made into the following video, where each Inspirer verbally describes the meaning behind the image that they've chosen.
Not enough money in your pocket.
I made a cake, but my poverty affects the hobbies that I can and can't do, so I can't always do my hobbies.
Heat or eat, the dilemma facing a lot, maybe millions this winter. With fuel prices as they are and food inflation still over 13% and not going down as fast as general inflation, which one do I choose? Keep warm or don't eat? Which one?
fighting to even breathe, others oblivious, sailing above on still waters.
This photo describes my feeling of being trapped and feeling caged through this experience, like I'm in a zoo. I look out and have hopes for the future. I long to be out, but with not being able to afford essential living. Feeling like people can look in and need to be able to talk to them about some of the biggest things of your life in order to help you. Oh, that's happening. Be patient. Things will be okay in the end, and be able to walk away. Sometimes never seeing them or any of the promises they make again. It's a sense of isolation, abandonment, and mental pain which only encourages distrust of others, altering how you then open up to those who can truly help. Through the cage, though, the outside is still in the distance, to remind you that there is a world outside of being trapped by poverty and the issues alongside it. No matter how small that view through this mental cage may be, there is always hope. Just don't give up.
Endless torrent, no escape.
This shows the impact of increasing food costs and what I can afford today. Either that or I don't eat at all.
"16 deaths in Cheshire West due to homelessness in the last 5 years. 16 abandoned properties in one street. Just one of these properties could have saved a life. Homelessness is the forgotten about. The person curled up on the street that everyone walks past and ignores. Homelessness is being left trapped in a room with no support and nowhere to call their home. Sleeping on a hardwood floor, cold. Homelessness is getting blamed and judged. Constant whispers from ignorant mouths. They've only got themselves to blame. Well, if they'd prioritise their spending, they would have a roof over their heads. How can you budget what you don't have? Where's the empathy or understanding? Homelessness comes in many forms: domestic abuse, family breakdown, landlords selling up, or even for no reason at all. How would you feel if one day everything you ever owned or knew had gone?
The photo is something that made me really sad the other day. I had just left a meeting for the Pathfinder Trussell Trust project about ending the need for food banks, and I saw it in a shop. I don't think I need to explain it much, but the fact that there was a security tag on baby milk just made me very sad.
Sleeping in the car overnight between a late and early shifts patterns because your place of work is 40 minutes drive away from your home. As coming to the end of the month and you're waiting for the next pay packet, you can't afford the petrol to keep your car running to take back home. This is why you are sleeping in the lay-by overnight near the place where you work, with no hot or cold food to survive the next shift, or when you're supposed to be looking after people in a care home.
I painted this picture to show my experience and to show the experience of other people I know who have been affected by financial stress as a symptom of chronic poverty. The essentials are seen floating out of reach on the container ship in the background. The grey storm clouds show that poverty is a storm that you battle, the grey clouds showing the impact on mental health, the battle to just keep your head above water. The lighthouse shows the hope of help, representing food banks and places of shelter. The ladder shows you have to pull yourself up, and it's a long climb. You rely on others for help instead of having independence. The speech bubbles represent thoughts about the lived experience of poverty, with the bills mounting up, weighing you down, heavier, heavier, dragging you down.
It's a photo of the local community cupboard which redistributes waste from businesses and supermarkets. The cupboard is open 24 hours a day and you can take items without having to pay, or you can pay what you can. The cupboard is outside, so no need for a referral or even having to tell someone your circumstances. I use this a lot, and it's nice to be able to access food without any judgment or embarrassment.
All about life, what you face.
I now feel like I can be open and honest. It feels like I am opening up a book and starting a new chapter, taking the next step.
Even after the worst storm comes a rainbow.
Social Justice Chester and the West Cheshire Inspirers have formed an ongoing and collaborative relationship. Together we look forward to continuing to co-produce responses to poverty and injustice. Our current plans in the pipeline include co-creating a further public event building on the huge success of the exhibition for the University of Chester's Festival of Ideas, and a pilot podcast episode about the lived and living experiences of poverty. Here are our contact details and where to find us on socials. We hope that you've enjoyed our talk and that it has aided your understanding of the realities of poverty and provided inspiration for ways of researching poverty using participatory approaches and disseminating research findings to the public. Thank you.
So much to all those who contributed to those videos. It's great to be able to share them as part of this event, bringing an important perspective on the wide-ranging issue of poverty. It's so important to remember and highlight the voices of those who are experiencing or have experienced poverty in all its forms. I believe those videos helped set the scene for how co-production at all points of a project can be implemented. It's an inspiring and thought-provoking methodology, and one that can work alongside more traditional data analysis to produce impactful research, interventions, and engagement. We're coming to the end of our session now, and I would very much like to thank those who have contributed today. I'd like to thank Christina Adane, Professor Nissa Finney, and all those involved in the Chester project. I would also like to thank the Research, Impact and Engagement Manager for the UK Data Service, James Lockwood, for all his work in bringing the Poverty and Data event together. And thank you for joining us this morning. We hope it's been an interesting and thought-provoking session. This recording will be available after the event on our YouTube channel and shortly on the UK Data Service website. So please share it with anyone you think might benefit from watching it. We have one final session of our Poverty and Data event, which is a panel presentation and Q&A panel tomorrow morning at 11 AM on Zoom. Head to our website for more information and to register. Thank you.